All right, so we are on the air. Mr. Olson, why don't you join us please at the head of the table? This is, good morning. It is Friday, April 2024. It's a little after 8:30. We're meeting this morning on 8687, an act relating to community resilience and biodiversity protection through land use. And we have an Addison County guest, and former legislative council member, Mr. Olson. So, Mr. Olson, good morning. If you could, where's it going? If you could just introduce yourself for the record.
Yes.
And we're a little tight on time, but I'm sure you know how to use 10 minutes or so well.
I'm a little older, but I'm still light on my feet.
That's I think a lot of people are playing that in here right now.
So thanks very much for giving me this opportunity to testify. I know the crunches you're under, especially. It's getting there, so I know the crunches you're under.
So thanks. And the other thing too is, I know that you've provided some very detailed feedback in email. So if you can submit written testimony with more information, we'll certainly welcome that and use it in the coming days as we enter the.
Yes, I did send in some.
It's on the website.
On our website, so.
Here's was the one for?
Yes. Thank you.
And
Thank you.
And you know, at some point, I've got history with the maps.
They love them.
Yeah, they color it too, so. So again, just to start out, I'm Senator Gray's constituent. I had a great experience a couple of years ago when our town was having a little bit of fuss over the state board of education over some withdrawal legislation or school district, and Senator Gray was really helpful in terms of getting some guidance about how to deal with that situation. So I still remember that and talk to people about that. Now I'm here out of some concern around the two pieces of legislation they have, I think, in front of you. That's 311 and then H 687. And the main message I have for you is that the way, from what I can tell from the legislation, the creation of tier 3 boundaries would be really devastating for our town in terms of our ability to support affordable housing in the town. And my, I guess, secondary or other key message would be, I don't think it's necessary to have the limitations of tier 3 in order to both protect our natural resources and to promote affordable housing. Let me give you a little background to explain where I'm coming from here. We're a very small town. We have all of 1,700 residents in our town. We're smack dab up against the Green Mountains, foothills.
A little like Bristol.
What's that?
A little like Bristol, like right against the mountain.
Yeah, we are. The dreaded western slopes attacked us last night with the wind. So if you ever hear about the winds on the western slopes, read that, we know all about it. Small community, really pretty closely knit. And it's like so many towns, and frankly, the state of Vermont, we would very much like to promote housing in our town. We think it's really important to maintain a vibrant, really alive community. It's also really important, given the pressures that I think there are at the state and district level to close, the elementary schools of some of our towns. And we're thinking, to keep our population up, man, we're gonna lose our school, or we're gonna be sad.
Sure. And it's a great school, but one of those part of the community, small town schools.
We have a few of those.
So I just have to brag a little bit. Our principals told us at a meeting that are, I mean, we got at least half the folks eligible for creating new storage. Third grade tested proficient or above in math this year. Wow. Anyway, so yeah, we do.
And it's not everyone right now post-COVID. Especially now.
It's hard. They've done a great job. Let me get back to. Yeah, I know. The reality is that we don't have much land available for housing. We have, some good agricultural land along Route 116. We got a lot of forested land, steep slopes, that's not suitable for housing. Mainly what we have a couple of village centers. Thank you very much, by the way, for talking at a town meeting about that really spurred an effort in our town to look more closely at that, and that's something that we're actively pursuing today. So the land that we have available for housing is in our village centers, along 116. We have South Starksboro, we call it Jerusalem, or everybody, we call it for something like and then we have areas on either side of our class 3 town roads, and so yeah, so and we have a variety of tools that we use to try to protect density tools, mainly to protect agricultural land. We have so you're looking at the map. This is our town zoning map, and it shows the different districts, kind of a traditional sort of thing. The light green is the ag land down in the valley. As you can see, most of the land is classified, is put into our forest conservation district with some pretty tight limitations. You cannot do any development in that dark green without a conditional use permit from us, and that's you're gonna get a real hard test if you want to build in that. So really the only land that we have available is what's shown in red. Those are village centers. And the one here is the one at South Starksville that goes over the mountain to the skiers and to Waitsfield. And then the yellow areas are class 3 roads. And we have a fairly narrow corridor on either side of the class 3 roads, which are classified as low density. It's residential use. Morning. How are you doing? Good. So it's that's the land we got. The concern we have, and I don't think we're atypical for a lot of towns in Anderson County. I don't think we are looking from this. It's probably right. We're probably not dissimilar or atypical from a lot of towns in Anderson County. I was speaking to the executive director of our regional planning commission, and he said, yeah, a lot of towns in Addison County are going to feel the same pressures, that we're feeling for that too.
So are you thinking that all the dark green, the forestry conservation lands will end up being identified as tier 3? Is that the concern?
Yeah, so down, I think one map below.
Okay.
That's the Biofinder format. I took a screenshot of it the other day. I couldn't blow it up. I have to have my son's help to figure that out. But I think it gives you the gist. The light green, the dark green is classified in Biofinder 4 as highest priority for forest block protection and habitat corridor. I wasn't able to overlay the habitat corridor,
And it's classified that way by whom? In the.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So this, and I sort of left above. So you got tier 3 in legislation. The legislation makes reference in terms of how the board, not municipal officials, how the board would create tier 3 boundaries by reference to the Vermont Conservation Design, Conservation Design prepared by the Agency of Natural Resources. The Agency of Natural Resources, obviously, the Department of Fish and Wildlife is part of them. And Biofinder 4, quite explicitly in its sort of preamble, says, we're trying to implement Vermont Conservation Design. So to me, anyway, while the legislation doesn't say, oh, tier 3 is going to have boundaries per 504, it doesn't say. But to me, the link is pretty clear. So that's our concern anyway.
Okay. So, right, and so your concern is in a certain way, a lot of Starksboro will be told, don't, you're off limits for development, or you're gonna. Actually, criteria 3, the tier 3 stuff is off limits, that's Act 250 with.
Yeah, Act 250, I think gets a bad name, for us. I've been around since I was an actor. So I've seen the ups and downs of that. And I'm not one of those people that, trashes them. I am concerned though, if you look at these compare these two
Yeah.
maps. This is the byfinder that we worried would be used as a prime source for the boundaries. And then you look at what we have right now, we don't have a whole lot of land available for housing. And from what the fear, again, it's not written directly in the legislation, the fear is that this map would supersede beautiful mapping. We wouldn't have any place to build.
Yeah, okay. So thank you for helping us better understand what it feels and looks like from the municipal level. I think the committee's intent is not to be doing what you're concerned that we could be doing. So,
I think you feel about that.
yeah, and I think. So for instance, the bill, no matter what tier you're in, doesn't say no development. It just says different criteria will apply in different tiers in different ways. So sort of the green lighting of development in the 1A, 1B.
The 1A, 1B, right?
2 is everything that's not 3 or 1A, 1B, which is and in the critical areas, then we're looking at applying things, for instance, like the road rule things. But yeah, you're trying to avoid, minimize, offset, force block disruption, stuff like that. So I don't know if the intent is not a no, it's like if we're going to be developing in those areas, develop in a manner that's has the lowest adverse impacts, for instance, tier 3. Yeah, because it feels like we need to be sure that we're clear about how that process is going to unfold. The other thing is that, so as envisioned in the bill, there'll be those RPCs developing maps and in consultation with every municipality, and then those will be brought up to the board.
Yeah.
Are you feeling as though, and also the tier 3 stuff, because it's so much under discussion, we're envisioning in the bill that it will be developed and rolled out through rule machine, which may or may not be heartening to you, plenty of noticing comment opportunities.
I have too much experience in state government, let's put it that way.
So that, the model at least is consultation and development with the towns from like grassroots up. Not that the state is gonna be finding 60,000 feet, see stuff, but say, okay, we draw boundaries for you. Good luck down there.
Yeah, and I appreciate that kind of nuance.
Yeah.
And hey, I've read legislation for a living, so I kind of understand that
Sure.
direction. And
But it's not reassuring to you in some way, right?
it's somewhat, but I gotta be honest.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna sleep well tonight if that. It's so I think there were some key differences.
Yeah.
And I would suggest, I mean, I understand you got a lot of work to do in very short period of time. I would urge you to focus on a few things. I guess the first thing would be, why do you need to have the state board create a tier 3 boundaries? We can do a pretty good job protecting our forest. Now, maybe there's some towns that don't do it, I understand. But if I have absolute confidence in the ability of the legislature to create standards and procedures for towns to ensure to ensure that the towns, protect the natural resource. Again, in balance, there's always got to be a balance in my mind. I mean, some things, no balance, some natural features, resources, you really gotta protect. I understand that. But say overall in a town, for example, I think that, there needs to be a little bit of balance, and I think the current framework is focused on protecting natural resources. That's great. We're all for, I mean, we've proven that. But we also, the biotime event, it's a wonderful tool. I think that's a great planning tool. But admittedly, I think the Department of Fish and Wildlife, they're focused on preserving natural resources. That should be. Shouldn't be their business. I don't think they're really equipped to deal with communities and their need for affordable housing. That's not their mission. True.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, sure.
I apologize, I have to go present an amendment in a moment, but I did want to say I.
Maybe a good one.
Thank you, I appreciate your testimony, and I'm wondering if, and perhaps it's in your written testimony. I'm generally in agreement with your concern, and it sounds like goal of having a more defined tier 3, so that you don't end up in a situation where there's lots of things that get looped into tier 3 that might limit you as a community. The way that we've been kind of discussing it is those tier 3 things are those special natural resources. And I've been picturing like the waterfall versus like the whole river.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you should know that there's definitely conversations in the committee about how we define tier 3. And I do like the suggestion of having municipalities be as involved as possible. But to Senator Bray's point, I actually think we do that pretty well in the bill. So if there are specific sections that you'd like to mention, I'll look out for them in your written testimony. And I did want to apologize for the part.
No problem. And one of the things I do in my sleep right now
In your sleep.
is to propose amendments.
Oh, there you go.
But
There you
talk
go.
to you folks to get some sense of where you kind of.
Thank you.
Senator Coney.
Thanks. I'm still exploring this field.
Yeah.
So I haven't taken it on any final opinions. One of the things I'm concerned about, one of the questions I have to do with tier 3.
Okay.
This is being presented as somewhat of a quid pro quo transaction. That we're giving up Act 250 protections. And the domains, they present it as automatically understood as a good thing. It's a gift to the towns. I'm not sure it's a good.
Depends on the town. Yeah.
Well, it's less protection of the environment, and I'm not sure that's a gift. But the idea, we're giving up Act 250 protection in certain towns,
Yes.
but we're getting tier 3. And that's gonna protect particularly valuable areas. Against location based, we're gonna have a development where we want it. My sense is, and I'm not saying this is so, but what I'm looking at is. It seems to me that tier 3 gives the environment and protectors of the environment. Something we already have. So because
Of that action that we already.
protection of particularly vulnerable, particularly important areas. And I keep mixing the name of the south side of Killington. I keep mixing up with the dangerous ski area in New Hampshire. Where is Parker's Gore? Is that?
Vermont Gore,
Yeah,
that's in the Killington area.
yeah, that's the Parker's Gore proposal, which is probably going back 25 years now. They were gonna develop the whole south side of Killington Park before. And it was stopped because of. It was a corridor between bear habitat and bear habitat.
Yeah.
I mean, we already have the power, the ability to protect corridors, to protect habitat, so on.
Yeah, no, I hear you, and I don't know the ins and outs my gosh, I am not an academic expert. But obviously there was a trigger, there was an Act 250 trigger jurisdictionally, that brought that project, within the jurisdiction, and, good review. We had a similar case, other side of the Green Mountains from us, when, Sugar Bush area, when they got bought out, when Glen Allen, now Sugar Bush, no one got bought out. They wanted to do a tram to make the two, the two, skiers, which they were successful in doing. But only after, pretty rigorous active, it was high enough, I believe, that it triggered the 2,500 feet, I think, maybe with this some other. And, I think they built it, but they made a lot of modifications because of us, they had. So that's what I'm saying, I'm not the group that's trashes Act 250. I thought that was a decent process. People can see, good for the state, good for the state revenues, but still features in there that were attempted to, protect.
Well, I was focusing on your printed remarks, where you have the comment where you say
Yeah,
that we already have the ability. My other key message is that tier 3 proposal that's currently drafted are not necessary.
Yeah.
To present from non-sports models.
yeah, and the reason why I say that, and that was, I said something in response to Senator Craig around, who's the decision maker, or at least initially, who's the decision maker? And the bill has currently that says, RPCs will propose to us and board, I believe, will make the decision. Whereas I think where I'm coming from is, towns, at least ours, what's going on there with the system? Our town, I think, has done a pretty good job of protecting our forest farms, right? And maybe there's some towns that aren't in that spot. Number one, I think the biofinder will be real helpful to them, those towns that haven't focused on it. But if they're not, create some more other standards around, you have to look at biofinder. Or whatever, or you have to consider it.
Right, I'm not sure Biofinder is gonna be the tool for that. That's a great question, like what is the role, I mean, one of the notes I wrote down, is Biofinder the starting for developing tier 3? And I haven't heard anyone say that. Vermont Conservation Design gets consulted, but I don't know what they're doing to determine if, like, just data for that group, including the municipalities participating with their RPCs, have a conversation, or someone saying, oh, well, Biofinder's already done the work for us. So I think we need to go on to hear from Mr.
I hear you.
But I hope you'll stay, and I hope
I will.
Mr. will maybe comment on
I'm looking forward to it.
in part, if you're prepared, who knows, this is like a live fire exercise.
Crossfire or something.
Yeah, and it's a healthy thing for all of us, because we end up learning stuff by the back and forth between people come in.
But I appreciate your folks' work, and I appreciate you hearing from me. I'll try to follow up with,
Yeah.
to respond to some of the questions that, obviously can't find this moment.
Maybe we can catch up this weekend.
I'd love to.
Okay.
I got my number down there. Your time is probably a little more scheduled than mine.
Doing that lately. But
So give me a call, Senator, I'd be happy to talk.
ever been to Mini Factory?
What's that?
Have you ever been to Mini Factory in Bristol?
Yeah.
The new bakery, all right.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That would be fun. I would love to do that. I would love to do that.
All right. Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Yep.
I got one more thing.
Or the same.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. She came. Okay. Good morning, Mr. Shute. So there are things let's slow down a little bit. Let's take 15 minutes now and we'll be back together again for 5 hours on Monday. So we need more conversations to come, but whatever you wanted to share at the moment. And
Sure, I did,
We can have a little time to respond to the peer three concerns that Mr. Olson's raised.
Great, Brian Schubert, my Natural Resources Council. I did, provide you with some written testimony that I'm gonna refer to. What I'd like to do is just run through some of the points that have been made in other testimony. I'm starting in particular with, Charlie Baker's testimony.
Thank
And
you.
in doing that, I just want to acknowledge that I think one of the reasons that we're optimistic about 687 this year and the direction that we're heading in is because the regional planning commissions have done such a good job of stepping up and really using this as an opportunity to reinforce regional planning and make it an important part of our regulatory program and through their mapping exercise. So we're really excited about that. We appreciate the work that they've done and the coordination that they've done with us. Although we do have a couple areas of small district rate provision, the ones I want to focus on. First, in Charlie's testimony that was dated April 11th, they suggested changing or amending the title and purpose section of 687 to address the housing goals that it will achieve. And we support that. Really also suggested taking these sections 2 through 22 of Senate Bill 311 and incorporating those in 687. We also support that with 2 exceptions. Section 16 of S311 would change the bylaw adoption process. Presently, a select board or a city council can adopt the bylaws with a vote of the majority vote of the council or the select board, or they can decide to send it to the voters for a vote. And this would eliminate that second option, giving them discretion to send a zoning amendment or a new zoning bylaw to the voters. Although the voters could petition to force a vote. And I've found in my experience with local zoning matters that sometimes the select board says, this is gonna go to a vote one way or another, let's just get it there up front, and this will take away that opportunity. The other probably more troubling section 18, would change the right of 10 citizens to appeal a decision of the development review board. It would increase that number to 25 or 3% of the population of the town. We believe that citizens should have a right to hold the development review boards accountable. And that the 10 citizens is not typically, it's not, it would be great to see some data on how often that is used to appeal a project. There are a couple of poster childs of long drawn out appeal processes, most recently down in Putney, also in Woodstock. I'm pretty sure both of those, I know the one in Putney was not 10 citizens, it was an individual neighbor who was appealing the project. And our goal in this bill would be to improve the appeal process for Act 250, thereby making the court a more efficient process for zoning, because they're would not have to deal with Act 250 anymore. It would just be the zoning appeals that we're dealing with. One thing that we're interested in as an alternative to that is we really do want to get into the appeal process for zoning. I think the House Committee on Housing and General Affairs took some testimony on creating a housing appeals board, much like the process that was developed in New Hampshire, which has proven to be a lot more of an efficient process for zoning appeals. We kind of ran out of time to suggest that maybe the environmental review board that would be created by 687 could play that purpose, and the committee might want to look into that in the future. We would advocate for that.
Right, and I think we talked a little bit about even having amongst the new board or professionalized or expanded board that maybe one or more person would be specifically tasked with being like that or housing expert.
Yeah, and if you did go in the direction of having them be not only that particular appeal board, but a housing board, you could have hearing officers that would expedite the process. So those are the 2 pieces that we would suggest not including like 311 in this 687. We also, the other pieces that we would not like to see is some of those sections include Act 250 exemptions that we feel are too expansive, too open-ended, and could have some real damaging environmental consequences. The regional planning commissions and Charlie's testimony provided an alternative to maybe do an interim tier 1A and tier 1B to be in effect while the regional planning commissions are going through the process of defining 1B and 1A. And we have a little bit of a different approach. What Charlie's recommendation was that an interim tier 1A would be any housing development within a half mile of a designated downtown or a growth center or town center. And tier 1B would be up to 50 units on 10 acres within a quarter mile of a designated village center. We would advocate that both 1A and 1B in the interim be capped at 50 units on 10 acres. And that it be within a half mile of the downtown or a quarter mile of the village center. Those are only temporary measures until the actual tier 1A and tier 1B is developed. And one of the reasons I just want to repeat, I've said before that we are comfortable with that is we are talking about 10-acre towns who Act 250 isn't triggered for a commercial or industrial development until it's 10 acres or more. So it would be kind of on par with a housing project, with ultimately having the tier 1A, tier 1B designation process to put it in effect.
Okay, so, you're envisioning that 1A, 1B towns will always be 10-acre towns, not, someone have to.
Yes, that there is local zoning and subdivision regulations. And one thing that Catherine Dietrich and I were just talking about this morning is some of the terminology, in some places it says that towns have zoning and subdivision bylaws in effect. Other places it refers to land development regulations, which is a catch-all that includes all subdivision regulations, zoning, whatnot. We're not caught up on what the appropriate language is, as long as there is a local regulatory program in effect that deals with subdivisions and so. So that's really actually a pretty key recommendation from us, and I think from the RPCs, that it's an alternative to the open-ended and very broad exemptions included in 311. And I just want to point out too that there were other changes made by floor amendment in the House on 687 that brought other pieces of 311 into 687, and that included exemptions for accessory dwelling units and exemptions for converting hotels, existing hotels with commercial space into housing units. So there are other pieces of 311 that are already in there that have a regulatory impact. Charlie, you had talking about the section of the bill, section 5, that talked about dispositive permits, mentioned criteria 9 and 10. We don't feel as though that should be inappropriate. The local permits should be used to show compliance with those, because those are broader categories than local zoning might affect. So criteria, conforming to the regional plan, for example, shouldn't be dependent on a local zoning permit. So we agree with those sections, the references to criteria 9 and 10 should be removed.
So does that mean through 1 through 8, municipal and state permits? Would
Yes.
be a federal presumption?
Yes. And then there's been a lot of testimony regarding the designation requirements for tier 1A. We don't feel as though they are onerous or overly burdensome for communities. We do think that they could be clarified. And I suggested some language that would just, rather than saying that there'd be a form-based code ordinance, that there'd be a historic preservation bylaw, and that there'd be a habitat protection bylaw, that we just say that zoning be in effect, zoning subdivision bylaw that include the following provisions, and those should include urban design standards to deal with the physical form and scale of development, not necessarily a form-based code. That's pretty common, especially in our more densely developed areas in our downtowns, and also historic preservation standards in the bylaw, not affect a different bylaw. What we do, one of the things that we do agree with is the reference to the wildlife habitat planning bylaw. It is not necessary in these areas, but we did suggest that the definition of tier 3 be expanded to include, where it currently reads, tier 3 needs an area consisting of critical natural resources which may include river corridors, headwater streams, habitat connectors, and statewide significance. And as may be further defined by the board, we would add habitat connector for natural communities. And reason for that is that state does regulate development in natural communities, and it's for identify those as a critical resource that is.
So what's a natural community? Did you say natural?
Natural communities.
Oh, okay, and how is that defined?
I'm going to. PNRC is exceptionally well represented today in this room, and I'm gonna ask Jamie Fidel, our Forest Wildlife Program Director, to weigh in on that.
Jamie Vidal with PNRC. So natural communities are defined, there's been a lot of work by the agency, natural resources to define them. I think what was a natural community statewide significance would be. Conversations like a certain subset of those natural communities. Think of something like a sandplain or floodplain forest, something that's really sort of a rare natural community. And so, as we looked at what was required in the habitat bylaws, there were only certain sort of features that would be required there in natural communities. And then rare and endangered species, the river corridors. Rare and endangered species are covered under state law. We have a threatened endangered species law in the state that requires a permit if you're going to take those species. In the river corridors, you've been talking about a separate permitting process. So the natural communities was what we saw maybe lacking there. Thought that could be considered to tier 3. As you probably know, in the tier 3 language in the rulemaking, it says it could be designated as a tier 3 area for Act 250, or is there another permitting program? No, or another permit or program that should identify it. And that's where there's been some discussion. Maybe there should be a model, bylaw or these kinds of resources, statewide. That would be another approach. So we're still trying to think what's the appropriate backstop there, but not to have that, be so broad at this point right now that it only applies in one area of the state and not another. Tier 3 was meant to look holistically.
Thank you. Well, part of it, there's so much infrastructure, regulatory or management or development infrastructure to be these natural boards, meetings, rules, procedures, guidance that I'm trying to find a way within our conversation, say, can we start laying out where we're heading and have a process between here and there that ensures that we have time for careful conversation so that we don't overcommit at the moment. Balance out aiming, articulating where we're going without trying to spell out all the details of how we're getting there. Not to avoid them, but to say it's a complicated conversation with a lot of different parties, and how do we set that process up more than nail things down at the moment. So anyway, that
I think that
thinking
we do
over,
have some suggestions for rulemaking process around tier 3. We agree that it does require more technical attention. And that we feel as though the rulemaking process will provide that. So we're hopeful and will certainly be paying close attention to it.
and I think that's Mr. Olson happens to be here this morning. Also here from Ted Brady on behalf of the LCT. I think there's a concern that people at a level more removed than they are from the community will start making decisions for them. So finding a way to engage communities in a productive way is part of our challenge.
So I will also say a couple other things about 687 that we support, and this in part cases in the McCormick has been asking kind of where's the balance where is the trades, where is the benefit to the environment in this, and we do support tier 1B, 1A and 1B process. We feel as though that it's carefully defined to minimize the adverse impacts in these areas that have been identified as appropriate for development, that have appropriate infrastructure, that have a local review process. And that Act 250 may not add the value, the level of protection that it exists through good planning and good local regulation. At the same time, we have long been concerned that Act 250 is not as effective as we would like it to be in dealing with the fragmentation of our forest resources, of our farmland, of our rural resources. And we feel this 687 moves us much more in the direction of doing that, and through several ways. The forest fragmentation criteria is really important. There is no existing fragmentation criteria under Act 250. It's ironic the Public Utility Commission has identified forest fragmentation as a natural resource issue. Act 250 has looked at wildlife habitat at times, but this would really put a standard in effect to say, when we're developing in our forest blocks, do it carefully, do it in a way that minimizes the impact that clusters of development. And we feel like an important companion to that criteria is the road rule. And to be clear that the road rule is different than the road rule that was in place for several decades and was taken away in 2002, I believe. That road rule looked at 800-foot, a single 800-foot road. What is in here, it looks at the cumulative road and driveway construction associated with a subdivision that caps out at 2,000 feet. That's a recommendation, a consensus recommendation that was put forward in the Natural Resources Board study. What was not included in the Natural Resources Board study, but was discussed and kind of punted to you, was a shorter standard for a single road as defined as serving multiple houses, in addition to the individual driveways that would spin off from that road. And we had recommended to the House that they agreed to go with an 800-foot road, and they combined 2,000 feet of road and driveway. And we think that will address some of the issues that were resulted in bad development practices under the old 800-foot road rule, where you have two 790-foot roads, for example, serving a driveway with serving subdivision with driveways spinning off in all directions from that. This is more contained. It will likely result in developers avoiding Act 250 by clustering their development to avoid the 2,000-foot mark, which we feel as though it's a good outcome. And we think that's a really important environmental gain in 687, and we support, and encourage you to keep that in there and not change dramatically. We also do believe that tier 3, as we talked about, is not going to include I think the green map that, I don't know Mr. Olson, but the green map that he showed. I do want to say that I did was interested in the Forest and Conservation District in Starksboro, and I just want to read the purpose of it quickly. This district is intended to protect the natural qualities of land that is generally not suitable for land development for many reasons, including poor or shallow soil, poor access to town class 3 or better roads, and other municipal services, steep slopes, and the adverse effect on the habitat of wildlife and other natural resources. They require, they limit the housing density to 1 unit per 25 acres in that district. So I do think that tier 3, if it does include parts of that district, it would be appropriate that there would be fulfilling the goals of the town in requiring Act 250 review of a larger development in that area. And I do think you made a very important point, Mr. Chair, that 3 is not an off-limits development, just as though we have seen development above 2,500 feet in the state of Vermont. We've just seen it done carefully because it was subject to Act 250 review. That's the goal of tier 3. What are those resources that are critical, are of statewide significance? And let's make sure that when development occurs in those areas, that it's done carefully, not necessarily that it can't be done at all. We did recommend making some changes to the stakeholder group for tier 3, and it included the Department of Forest, Parks and Recreation, we added the Department of Fish and Wildlife and Department of Environmental Conservation. When I've had conversations with agency officials, they've said, Fish and Wildlife thinks a critical resource is this, Forest Parks and Recreation thinks it's that, and DEC thinks it's something else, and that's for good reason. They have different missions and they have different areas of, jurisdiction. But it's important that they all be able to define what statewide significance is for all of the resources. And what is not in my written testimony, but I would like to also suggest is, there's a tier 3 stakeholder group process. The rule for the road rule is the NRB, and we think there should be a similar stakeholder group associated with that to define the road rule. And what they're going to define are things like how is a road defined? How many units or houses is being served by that area? There's been different definitions thrown around, 3 or 5. Probably talk about how measurements going to occur, where's the starting point. But we feel as though that should be stakeholder process as well.
Yeah. You've articulated several environmental benefits that come from the tier 3. Are they commensurate with what we're gonna cover?
If tier 3 is done as well as we hope, absolutely. Because we don't think we're giving up that much. I think that the regional planning mapping process, the way that the tier 1A and 1B areas are defined, requirements that they be in 2-acre towns, that there be some local oversight over development, that they be, contained within the 10-acre footprint, for a tier 1B in particular. I don't think that we're going to see a loss. In fact, what we've seen is with downtown development and redevelopment is often in certain communities, you see an upgrade of stormwater management, for example, in these areas because of the redevelopment that's occurring. There's environmental benefits associated with some of the development in these areas. We feel as though the tier 1, 2 with the road rule and forest fragmentation criteria, and the tier 3 is a very balanced package.
So we have most of that in your written comments.
Yeah, I would, maybe I'll amend it and make a suggestion for a stakeholder group in the road rule process.
Sure, that would be helpful, just so we know. I'm taking notes, other people take
Yeah.
notes, but we're moving on, things. So while you're still sharing, Mr. Olson, you have a question?
Yeah, I know you get your bells ringing, so, but, just to clarify a point that, great advocate, you very good. Our concern, I think Brian said, well, Act 50 will help and support something like our forest conservation, so. See a little different, we see the process laid out in legislation as superseding our rules and authority to create what we think is really good protection.
I just want to say from a forest conservation standpoint, I commend the town for having a thoughtful forest district and trying to preserve their very steep slopes, wildlife habitat. But I don't think it's that Act 250 will supersede their parallel process. It's in fact, most development, we have documented that most subdivisions are in the 2 to 3 lot range. Most of them are happening in forest districts and rural districts, and that'll probably continue to be the case. So Act 250 will hopefully encourage different development patterns in those areas in the road rule. But still, maybe unfortunately is not going to capture a lot of the development that's occurring in our rural lands today.
And seems like, in working with Mr. Fidel in the last decade, that, we're seeing something like 12 to 15,000 acres of forest land go up a year, mostly to development time. If someone who's actually clear cut, right? Sort of gnawing away the woods. as opposed to 11 company. It's adding up, 12 to 15,000 acres a year, I think surprises people. Then it's year after year after year.
Exactly.
So absolutely right, you know, and in our town, that big forest block, a lot of that is owned by the state of Vermont. And they came in a few years ago and they just, did a lot of clear cutting. We were a little upset, you know, obviously there wasn't much we could do about it.
Sarah McDonald, I think we're gonna go to. Or two, angry to speak. Right, good place to stop it. But, no, so what?
This time we're gonna listen to the draft board, make an exemption for, you know, drafted inner city for people and farm boards. To solve a war against homelessness.
I think that we're promoting smart growth, which has been our mission for decades.
I'm not, so, I'm not following, I get the historical thing you're referring to, but what do you see happening right now that gives you a concern? That we're,
Drafting the land. To build houses.
the emphasis on 1A and 1B doesn't just reassure.
You go to take the land from people, I'm not making sense, but it angers me, that's all. And there's a draft board that wants to get rid of appeals. If your appeal isn't valid, we don't have to listen to you.
We're not advocating that we get rid of appeals. We would like the appeals to go to the environmental review board, where it will be a better appeal process. For the environment.
Better meaning
I think,
more successful appeals or less successful appeals.
well, I think as we've testified before, that we believe that the environmental board better address policy decisions and help with the interpretation of criteria historically. It came up with precedent that was gave better direction than district commissions in the court has. It also did it in a much more timely manner. But we think that
Quicker appeals.
it served the environment better.
They'll have to draftees.
All right, so thank you, Senator McDonald. Thank you, Mr. Olson, thanks, Mr. Shute. We're gonna change gears, go back to, if you want to tune up your memo, that'd be great. We'll make sure that it's sent to you, we'll make sure everyone in the committee gets a copy. I suspect, many of us will be doing some reading and working this weekend.
And you're convening on Monday morning?
Monday morning, 10 o'clock. Full day session.
I appreciate you calling like that.
All right.
About Sanders, right?
Thank you. I was gonna say, I don't know if I have your phone number on your testimony.
Good to see her. Sharon.
Mr. Olson, what's your phone number?
We don't have that in mind.
Yeah, yeah.
Walk through and here.
I'm sorry.
You're like, yeah,
This will be here and soon. Oh, wait. So, let them in.
Mr. Stokowski, you could join us at the table. We are closing in on our read through on some 687. Okay. Just for anyone who's wondering, like, well, where are people on the committee? There's a family illness in Senator Watson's family, so she's not here. And Senator White is presenting an amendment. It should be back momentarily, I think. With that, we left off on the great journey yesterday, I think, on page 120 of 132.
Ellen Tchaikovsky, Office of Legislative Counsel. H687, page 120. This is still in the new chapter related to designated areas. This is a new provision on municipal technical assistance. So the Commissioner of Housing and Community Development shall develop a procedure for providing interagency technical assistance to municipalities participating in the programs under this chapter. The procedure shall include interagency assistance and address the following: general project advising and scoping services, physical improvement design services, regulatory and policymaking project services, programmatic and project management services, and legislative recommendations to the General Assembly to better align designation benefits with strategic priorities on or before December 15th, 2026. Procedures and recommendations shall address statutory state agency plans with a focus on the following strategic priorities for municipal and community development assistance: housing development, growth and equity, climate resilience, coordinated infrastructure investment, local administrative capacity, equity, diversity and access, livability and social service, and historic preservation. On to page 121, so section 5808 is an existing fund. The downtown transportation and related capital improvement fund. The language in it has not changed. This is an existing section from chapter 76A. Do you want me to read it?
Let's, how about just point out, not read it, but point out what it's doing. So we
There's-
pause a little bit on.
There's an existing fund. The downtown transportation fund. It exists in chapter 76A, it's being moved here. And municipalities with designated areas can apply for transportation capital projects to the fund.
So does this include things like building bus stops or bus, are we talking about public transportation?
I do not know, I do not work on this. This is an economic development issue or transportation, but it's in this chapter, so there are no changes made to it. The same is true on the next page for 5809, which is the brownfields program. Again, this is, the language in this section is not changing at all. It is just being moved to this new chapter.
Okay. We talked about brownfields and the work.
On page 124, 5810. Again, is moving the Better Places program, which already exists in chapter 76A. To this new chapter. The only difference here is that currently the Better Places program is set to sunset on July 1 of this year. By moving it to this chapter, this will make it permanent. There's no sunset attached to it.
Have you any experience with this program?
I do not.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I step out.
Yeah. Hey, we don't have a quorum. We don't have a quorum. We're gonna wait till you get back. Thanks. Maybe. So let's, we got a little pause here.
I was in text anyway to see.
Yeah, maybe you could check and see how he's doing across the hall. Hopefully Steve's. Going to transportation present an amendment at 9:40.
Yeah, okay. You know how she can talk about transportation.
Yeah, we love transportation.
Oh, a great title there.
Appreciate her
Oh, so you guys have the College Council?
enthusiasm for transportation. Well, the thing I was gonna ask about is that, lines 8 through 10. Purpose of the program is to utilize crowdfunding to spark community revitalization through collaborative grant making projects that really activate or revitalize public spaces. So
This is a little bit of an unusual program,
yeah, now
it's crowdfunding.
heard a say in statute where an try to facilitate crowdfunding. So
It's
a curiosity.
Yeah, so it's a fairly recent program, that's why it has a sunset. She should.
Okay,
But it was created as an economic development program and it's administered by the department, so.
do you know how old it is? Like how long we've had that? Some.
I'm gonna
the
say
book knows.
2021, but that's a guess, I can tell you.
Okay. Crowdfunding,
Yes.
that's special war funding.
Crowdfunding, no, well, I'm kind of curious how they would define it. Whoever runs the program would be glad to. We don't usually talk about crowdfunding.
Yeah, 2021.
That's internet culture war. Drum up some money on the internet.
Creative fundraising.
It's perfectly legal, but it's not government.
Well, so while we're having a casual conversation,
yeah.
waiting for Zoom formal testimony, can you help us a little?
Yeah, so it's in person. It is an unusual program, and so it's a, on the agency side, a collaboration between Department of Housing and Community Development, I believe Department of Health, Department of Transportation, others are kind of in on it. And then on the community side, it's, I don't think there's anything stopping them from fundraising online, but it's meant to be more of a in-person kind of, if we want to help support Do a Better Places project, for example, to renovate our historic Grange Hall, then I would go around to my neighbors and try to fundraise our match for the agency funds, and then they're bringing in technical expertise and the funding support, and there's this entire platform that's actually pretty cool that they have online to help walk communities through this process.
Just to get money from.
So yeah, instead of essentially, if you think about, usually when we have a municipal match for our grant program, this is instead having kind of the municipal match coming from neighbors pitching. So it's a way to kind of also get buy-in and excitement for the project.
But that's not covered.
It's not covered.
Government.
Oh, government. Yeah,
This is a philosophical disagreement, but.
yeah.
And it's. It's not policy decided by policymakers, it's. Contributions based on. What,
What the community decides they wanna see, and then
the online community,
well, then.
no. No one's knocking on doors to contribute to
I
our,
think the process, I don't know, Catherine, if you've had any experience with any of the Better Places projects, but I believe it's a relatively similar process to how we would generally do other types of like municipally based grant programs. Why am I trying to blank? There's Better Places, thank you, Better Connections. So there's already kind of similar processes that take place. I think the biggest difference with the program is that they have the crowdfunding platform. But in the way that how the grants get chosen through agencies and the way that they provide support would be very similar to existing programs, particularly through the Department of Housing and Community Development.
Do you want me to read through the language? I can.
So let's go back online now that we have a quorum again, and where we've.
Well, page 124 is this program.
Yeah, so line 3, 5810, let's just start a read through there.
Yeah, and I guess I'll say, so this program is set to sunset, so. You can take a look at whether or not you want it to sunset or not. So a Better Places program crowd granting. There is created the Better Places program within the Department of Housing and Community Development. And the Better Places Fund, which the department shall manage as a special fund. This shall be the same fund that was created under the prior section 2799. That's what currently exists in chapter 76A. The purpose of the program is to utilize crowdfunding to spark community revitalization through collaborative grant making for projects that create, activate, and revitalize public spaces. The department may administer the program in coordination and support from other state agencies and nonprofit and philanthropic partners. The fund is composed of the following: state or federal funds appropriated by the General Assembly, gifts, grants, or other contributions to the fund, and any interest earned by the fund. As used in this section, public space means an area or place that is open and accessible to all persons with no charge for admission and includes village greens, squares, parks, community centers, town halls, libraries, and other publicly accessible buildings and connecting spaces such as sidewalks, streets, alleys, and trails. On to page 125. The department shall establish an application process, eligibility criteria, and criteria for prioritizing assistance for awarding grants to the program. The department may award a grant to a municipality, a nonprofit organization, or a community group with a fiscal sponsor for a project that is located in or serves an area designated under this chapter, so one of the designated areas, that will create a new public space or revitalize or activate an existing public space. The department may award a grant to not more than 3 projects per calendar year within a municipality. The minimum grant award is $5,000 and the maximum grant award is $40,000. The department shall develop matching grant eligibility criteria, requirements to ensure a broad base of community and financial support to the project, subject to the following. A project shall include in-kind support and matching funds raised through a crowdfunding approach that includes multiple donors. An applicant may not donate to its own crowdfunding campaign. A donor may not contribute more than $10,000 or 35% of a campaign goal, whichever is less. An applicant shall provide matching funds raised through crowdfunding of not less than 33% of the grant award. The department, on to page 126, may require a higher percentage of matching funds for certain project areas to ensure equitable distribution of resources across Vermont. The department, with the assistance of a fiscal agent, shall distribute funds under this section in a manner that provides funding for projects of various sizes in as many geographical areas of the state as possible. The department may use up to 15% of any appropriation to the fund from the general fund to assist with crowdfunding, administration, training, and technical needs of the program. So I obviously didn't write this section originally, David did, and it's from 2021, it was set to expire this year, so it's only a 3-year term.
So this is a program that goes to crowdfunding to provide equitable funding of resources for things that government thinks is important enough to try and do, but not pay for.
My sense from seeing things like this, not knowing whether they happen in the Better Places program or not, is like a community has something like a steeple they want to or renovate, and they're fixing up a church that gets used for public meetings, and it's happens to be on the green, and they can't. They're having trouble coming up with the money, so my sense was that when the state can kick in some money, it also helps with the local folks who are doing fundraising, because they feel like, oh, their money is gonna be leveraged, and then sort of you hope a snowballing effect of some state money for a project that passes the review ends up boosting the efforts of the local fundraisers.
So what I think of is Stowe following Act 60. Where they raised funds locally to not have to contribute to the law that provided equity for schools throughout the state. We had a law that was designed to provide equal access to funds. And it was in statute, and they went out privately and raised money in order to not have to pay their share of the lawful monies to operate their schools, to deny equity. It was designed to do that. How is this different?
Mr. Meeker? Well,
I'll just say, if you'd like to add a sunset, you could do that.
I mean, we asked Mr. Cochran to be here. Unfortunately, he's not here. We're inviting him again for Monday. I hope they'll be here. We haven't had ACCD in the room for a week. It's hard to do this work without them present, especially this language focuses on their sections of the bill. So I hope we'll see them soon, and then they can answer some of the questions. I suspect that they'll be helpful, just more information that may make this seem a more reasonable and might alleviate some of your concerns. I don't know that. I hope that's true. We'll find out. Mr. Meeker.
Thank you, Catherine Dmytryk, the Northwest Regional Planning Commission. I'm glad Chris will be here to talk about this program a little bit. I think one of the unique things about this program is it focuses on community-based projects that don't usually fall in other funding sources, like the Hartford Wilbur 1 and 2 Memorial, like the Enosburg Recreation Field, Cornwall Outdoor Recreation Area, Town Hall, and Public Theater, places that aren't typically eligible for other government grant programs and are really community important to the community itself. One thing that the Regional Planning Commission would certainly support about this section is it allows the agency to require a higher percentage of matching funds than 33%. We think the agency should have flexibility to require a lower percentage too, to make it more accessible to those communities that might have some challenges raising the 33%.
You talk about putting up a monument there.
Yes, Hartford, Vermont is putting up a World War I and is it World War II as well?
World War 1 and 2.
Oh, it's World War I and World War II, restoring it. The Abbott family will be high alphabetically on that list.
What's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with that. I think she's making the case that's an example, right?
Yeah, it's great. For examples of the types of projects that this program funds.
Well, but the whole, with the state, I mean,
It's a mix of state and local.
okay. So now I'm gonna cross the line.
You don't have to.
No, it's down in the southern part of the United States, they're tearing down monuments that were made with public funds. And you gotta be careful about that stuff. You have to be careful about talking about it.
Hopefully we will have no Confederate war monuments in Vermont. The state has an army, is not on the list of monuments.
Which had its roots in things that they, talked about,
Jim Crow.
well, you said it. And when you begin to get into crowdfunding and sanction it with government funds, you run the risk of not carrying out policies that you believe in but aren't willing to fund as a government. And we got rid of the draft because it was unfair. Yet what I'm listening this morning about folks having a board which drafts land for public good. And the draft board is of the Act 250 review. Does it get drafted or not?
I'm not agreeing with that assessment.
No, you know, but of course, you don't have to. But we need more housing. And we need more housing because there are people that can't afford it. So we're drafting land. for that housing. And some land gets drafted and other land doesn't. And of course, who's the officer for the name? Anyway.
So I'm,
And
I have a lot of creative writing and I have an imagination and I'm willing to stretch it and I'm having trouble with these analogies, so. Let's go back to reading the bill.
I don't wanna,
don't like it or dislike it.
I love it. We should
Mr.
talk.
Shute, then we'll go back to council.
Yeah, I just, since I was called the draft board, I just want to be clear that Vermont has had land use policies to plan for compact development surrounded by open working lands and natural areas for at least 5 decades. And we've had laws and policies to reinforce that. This is a continuation of that, it's consistent with that same policy. And it looks at the fact that we have planned for development in certain areas around our downtowns and village centers. This reinforces that. I don't see how it's not equitable. I just want to be really clear about that. I'm with the chair. I'm not quite sure I'm leaving it. So.
Yeah. I mean, we have, so on the critical resource areas, to me, it reminds me a lot of our discussion about wildlife being held in public trust. Water is the state, held in public trust. There are certain things that it may be part of someone's property, but we're also valuing them as a community. I'm using the word statewide community to say we want to hold on to certain things that are irreplaceable. Okay, back to the read through please. Well, I don't want to cut off anything. I don't want to close without someone feeling it's let's say the last thing, but then we need to keep going because we have a bill to produce by Tuesday.
Must be
Thank you,
changes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
This is a. This isn't. This is bigger than the small parts that we talk about as small parts, and it's part of a bigger thing that's going on. Thank you. Thanks.
Somehow when you said that, it reminded me of this ain't beanbag, it's what I thought you were gonna say, so, all right, off we go.
The final sections of this bill are on tax credits. So section 48 is amending the definition section of the downtown and village center tax credit program. The first thing it does is it replaces the reference to downtown, village centers, and neighborhood development areas with centers or neighborhoods. So this is true of the next couple of sections. It is replacing the references to that. So I do just want to pause before I read the rest of it. The question here is, in my mind, should we first, perhaps this should have a delayed implementation date until after the new names are in effect. So that is one thing. The other thing is that you just added the designated neighborhood development areas to this list 2 years ago. And after next year, under this existing statute, that is sort of sunsetting. So historically, these tax credits that I'll mention in a minute have only been available for buildings in downtowns and village centers. So now you're extending it to basically all of the designated areas. So you maybe just wanna consider that. And if so, do we need to rename this program?
Okay, so we were at, just to slow down and do the first set of them, like on line 1617, page 126.
Yeah.
Downtown, village centers, neighborhood development areas, NDAs, so if we weren't including new town centers.
New town centers and growth centers.
And growth centers.
And the neighborhood development area was new and only for a limited time. So traditionally, it has just been the downtown and village center tax credit program.
Okay. So Thank you. We need to appreciate that was covering 3, now it's covering all 5
Yeah.
flavors.
And potentially you don't know the full scope of those areas, it could be, now that with the automatic designation program, it could be more areas. So the same change.
Sorry, these definitions are used primarily to do what, provide, like the tax incentive provision.
Allocate tax credits, yes. Yeah. Tax credits that are awarded by the state board. So on page 127, the same changes made, again referencing centers or neighborhood areas. Makes that page twice on page 127. The other thing that this bill does is on 128. I mean, I guess I can explain the details of the tax credit program if you'd like to hear them. Okay, this is an existing program, there are 4 tax credits available. It has to be in a qualified building, which is at least 30 years old and income producing. On page 128, it's the other thing that this section is doing is making changes to the qualified flood mitigation project that you can then receive tax credits for. And this is a new tax credit that was added last year by the General Assembly. And so, if a qualified flood mitigation project means any combination of structural or non-structural changes to a qualified building. So a qualified building is at least 30 years old and income producing and located in one of these areas. And it's striking a qualified building that reduces or eliminates flood damage to the building or its contents. And it's striking the requirement that the building be located within the flood hazard area. So the intent here is so that it can be the building outside of the flood hazard area can apply for tax credits to do flood mitigation projects. You know, because in July, the floods expanded beyond the flood hazard area. It also has some additional language clarifying what projects are eligible, so this may include relocation of HVAC, electrical, plumbing, and other building systems, and equipment above the flood level, repairs or reinforcement of foundation walls, including floodgates, or elevation of an entire eligible building above the flood level. Further eligible projects may be defined via program guidance. The project shall comply with the municipality's adopted flood hazard bylaw if applicable, and a certification of compliance shall be submitted by a registered engineer, architect, qualified contractor, or qualified local official to program staff as opposed to the state board. Not entirely sure why that change is being made, but. And then on page 129, the state board, that reference is being updated to the community investment board. So I want to flag that this section 48 is doing 2 different things. It's updating all the names in this program, and it's also making changes to the qualified flood mitigation tax credit. So, currently, this section is set to take effect on passage with the rest of the bill. I do wonder, as I already mentioned, if the name changes should be delayed until the new designated areas are changed, but if that is the case, the changes to the flood tax credit itself, you may want to separate and have that take effect immediately.
Because currently it's not synced up with.
If you want to make those changes immediately. This is a suggestion.
Sure. Thank you.
The House did not take that suggestion.
Because of running out of time or not seeing the
Probably.
necessity of synchronizing name changes and program changes.
Unclear, probably time. Page 149. Section 49, still in the tax credit section, it's striking some language from 2011 that's no longer relevant. And then, on page 130. So I already sort of mentioned this, but beginning on July 1, 2025. Under this subchapter, no new tax credit may be allocated by the state board to a qualified building located in a designated neighborhood, unless specific funds have been appropriated for this purpose. So this is primarily what this is doing is updating the name of the program once again. But it is this sort of awkward provision because 2 years ago, the House added this, and so it is sort of looking at revisiting whether or not the tax credit should be available to designated neighborhoods after 2025, or at the time, neighborhood development areas. So that's why I mentioned there was a thought 2 years ago when there was the expansion of the program to designated neighborhoods. If that should be revisited in 2025. So anyways. It's a flag. Section 50 is increasing the amounts of the tax credits for 2 of them. So for code improvement tax credits, currently it's a maximum credit of $50,000. This is increasing it to $100,000. And for the flood mitigation tax credit, it's increasing it from $75,000 to $100,000. And then finally, well, section 51 is a revision authority section to change all the references from chapter 76A to 139. I actually think that you should either strike this provision or give this a delayed effective date, because once again, chapter 76A is not being appealed until 2027. And so I don't think this should take effect. I shouldn't do it this summer. I shouldn't do revision authority this summer. So either you should wait and include it in a, there's gonna need to be, if you pass this bill, there's going to need to be a technical correction bill. So either wait for that bill or have a delayed implementation date on this till at least 2027. So, finally, the effective dates, I have been mentioning them as we go, but the bill takes effect on passage. The change to appeals, so the appeals moving from the court to the board on our October 1, 2026. On page 132, the criterion 8C and the road rule take effect December 31st, 2026. Wait, no, that's not the road rule. Sorry, that's tier 3. Sorry, so. Got a great timeline. Yes, it's on the timeline. The road rule is actually on line 3, and that takes effect July 1, 2026. And then the name change to the designated area program takes effect January 1, 2027. And there is the timeline.
Right. It's a very helpful timeline, thank you. Okay, so with all, we just talked about these 2 tax credit sections and the revision authority. So these effective dates as currently provided from your perspective don't quite work.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think let's pause and it's pretty opaque to read through this series of cross references and know which things need to be lined up. I'm guessing it's not really the most effective way for us to do it. Do you want to make a proposal to the committee? I mean, you have
On the tax credit?
on the where the elements of the timeline don't line up.
I mean, I think I just did,
Yeah.
but you can look at we can look at the timeline if you'd like. I think otherwise.
But your recommendation on the tax credit is 2027, right?
Yeah, for the name change, if you. And then you have to separate out the qualified flood credit, the flood mitigation, if you want that to take effect sooner.
My sense is the goal we can implement the program sooner. If the name change related to, I think, that, for instance, we just added some very useful language, I think. Page 128, line 6 through 11. Making eligible things like HVAC relocation. which we saw in a big way was important. Would hate to delay allowing that, support that work. So just based on having name changes, so I think that would be the thing I would want to separate, how do we implement that without getting, create some confusion over where the names of the programs, how the names of the programs are defined to what they apply to. But we don't have centers in neighborhoods, 25, 26, right? Those don't, well, they don't become effective, so is there a way to just say that we change what they apply to following implementation of 27, right?
Yeah, I'll change the effective date.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got it. 2027, I like this.
So that's
What a great idea. Cool thoughts.
simple enough. Harder to describe than it is to do, maybe. Okay. With that, Senator Towns.
I'm looking at the downtown and village center program and tax credits, and I know we have approved tax credits in finance.
Yeah.
Which the purposes of the receiver of the money is the same as getting an appropriation. But is this separate and distinct from the downtown tax credits that are traditionally purchased by banks and other institutions as part of their investments, or is this,
No, it's the same.
it's the same group of people, it's the same source? So if one of those groups of individual taxpayers wanted to contribute to some other philanthropic purpose, they can only take so much off their income tax because the feds changed how much you can take off your income tax.
Yes.
Is this an unlimited in how much the contributions made through this tax credit program? Is it unlimited how much an individual person?
I don't know. I don't know. That's more of a tax question. I don't know.
I mean, this will, once we create this committee report, it will go down the whole findings.
Well, of course, by that time, I've already had be steaming on the rails at a certain number of miles per hour. I won't want to get out in front of the train.
Well, we had a head start, we did the pre-11 agreement for, I know.
I'll just say this program already exists and has existed since 1999 or 2000. It is not an expansion of the overall amount of tax credits, the annual amount. It's just increasing the amounts that can be awarded for individual projects. Your question is a different one, but that's the information I have.
It's one of those.
Yeah.
My next question was like an inflation adjustment.
This is the
I mean, in terms of the amounts, things like, things of.
tax credits that went into effect 4 years ago this summer. This coming
A year.
which went after blue states. It's not allowing blue states who had income taxes to make contributions against their income taxes. And in other states, without income taxes, but that's a question.
Sure.
Will you help me ask it?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
When the whistle blows, you're out of the trench first, I'll follow.
Anybody that can give that order that wasn't drafted.
What do you think was blowing the whistle? Okay, and where they stay after they blow it?
Who was it who said all analogies?
That's an analogy. Right there.
I can't go over the top because I live
No, okay,